Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have so many people joining us live right now, and I imagine some others will be watching the recording of this later. My name is Matthew Soerens. I serve as the Vice President of Advocacy and Policy for World Relief, and we're just really thankful to have so many of you joining us. I will say, just as a technological note, um, you will hopefully have some questions as we go about today's webinar. As we do, we'd encourage you to use the Q&A box. We've disabled the chat just because it's hard to monitor lots of different comments, but if you have questions, we want you to put them in the Q&A box, and we're going to do our best to respond to all of those questions, whether live with our panelists or by some World Relief staff who will be responding via text as well. So we are so grateful that you are here. If, like those of us on this panel today, you care deeply about the crises that affect people living in fragile situations around the world, and you want to see the church have a Christ-like response to these communities, you are in the right place. I'm so encouraged to have so many people joining us. For me and for many, the last couple months have been a whirlwind of emotions, sometimes frustration, sometimes confusion, but also of hope. We are here today to reflect on the new realities regarding foreign assistance and to explore how the church can faithfully respond. We're going to hear from leaders and advocates about the real impacts on communities around the world. We're going to pray for the challenges being faced and then share some practical ways that the church can take action. I mentioned that many of you are familiar with World Relief, but for those of you who are not, World Relief has a mission to boldly engage the world's greatest crises in partnership with the church around the world. Here in the United States, we're the largest evangelical refugee resettlement and immigrant services organization, which is our way of addressing a global crisis of forced displacement by caring for those seeking to rebuild their lives in the United States. And then internationally, we serve in many different contexts and sectors, engaging with crises and helping those who are seeking to help those in very fragile situations to flourish. We've been at this mission for 80 years now, and we do it in close partnership with local churches, first and foremost, but also with other community partners and with the federal and state governments. So to get us started today, we're going to introduce some voices of support, some people you might recognize. So we can go ahead and play that video.
Hi, my name is Dan Hasseltine. I'm the lead singer for the band Jars of Clay. I'm also the composer for the hit television series The Chosen and a founder of an organization called Bloodwater. A lot of my own work for the last 20 years has been spent in Africa working with organizations that have benefited from resources and programs that USAID have offered. Well, we're in a different position right now. Maybe for the first time since I can remember, we no longer have USAID. We no longer have these programs providing a foundation so that greater work can be done. There's a void, there's a gap. Programs that were serving people who are in need of nutrition, in need of clean water, in need of safety, in need of shelter, in need of education. Programs that basically just helped human beings be safe and have some sense of well-being have now been halted. What I've heard is that World Relief is trying to fill the gap. That void that has been left since USAID was gutted, we now have the opportunity to step in. A lot of people have argued that it's not America's job to take care of people around the world. The government is not supposed to be doing that. Well, now it's our job. The government is no longer doing that. And so now it's our turn. If you once believed that or spoke that or said that, now is your chance, because now is the time where we have to step in and we have to fill the gap and we have to keep programs going that serve people who need them. So I'm here to simply encourage you, take a look at what World Relief is doing and see if there's a way as believers, as people who care about such things, for us to be more generous. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Steve Taylor. 23 years ago, I joined with a group of fellow Christians to ring an alarm bell about the AIDS crisis in Africa. My wife and I traveled there to see firsthand the devastation and chaos that AIDS was causing in countries like Uganda, where 1 million children had been orphaned. On that trip, we visited an AIDS orphanage that had just been built, and I remember meeting this adorable little girl named Sarah, who helped make the crisis personal. Since then, thanks in large part to the support and advocacy of American Christians and partners like World Relief, our government through USAID and PEPFAR has funded medications that have saved over 25 million lives and reduced mother-to-child transmission to such a degree that Sarah's orphanage closed over a decade ago. And if you're wondering what happened to Sarah, well, she became our daughter 9 months later. Listen, our government is sometimes good at wasting money, and reform is often necessary. But if this administration pulls funding for these life-saving treatments, we could quickly have a replay of the AIDS crisis worldwide. When our government partners with Christian organizations like World Relief, we're able to save and change lives on a scale that private citizens and organizations cannot do on their own. So join me and other American Christians in letting our government representatives know that the love of Jesus has no borders. Thank you.
Well, we're so thankful for these voices of support, for these advocates, and for the many of you who have lent your voices to advocate along with World Relief in the past several weeks and months. So we're going to shift now and focus on the new realities of the foreign aid landscape. And we want to start with what's happening on the ground because of the pause in foreign assistance and stop work orders. We at World Relief have been facing some unprecedented challenges to our work internationally, as well as in the US in the past couple months. We've seen a wave of executive actions that significantly impact immigration policy, affecting everything from refugee resettlement and asylum to border enforcement, but also to foreign assistance. And that's where we really want to focus today. So to start, we're going to hear from some of our World Relief colleagues around the world about what they are seeing on the ground.
We have we have a problem in stopping funding, because the patients are coming to the facility and they're going back without having any drug. Like you can see here now, we have this is the side of antibiotic, and this is only the empty shelves. So we don't have any ciprofloxacin, we don't have a paracetamol, and this ibuprofen, we don't have an amoxicillin, and the shelf is empty. So this is because of the stopping funding. Before we were having all this and the shelf is full, that's why they have been just leveling, and now become nothing. Even from pediatric, we don't have nothing on the pediatric. This is just oral antibiotic. And the community, they are just patients that are insulting us. Why are you stopping this fund? And why are you not? Why are you just staying in the facility? And while there is no even a drug, why? And we are dying here now. It is very negative to be responded. This one is a big challenges from the community.
We thank you for your good work, and we pray that the donors see possible ways of funding us so that we shall be able to support the most vulnerable communities. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
In the recent crisis that happened in Goma towards the end of January and the beginning of February displaced very many people that had been in internally displaced camps in Goma for a very long time. These people, the crisis has pushed them to go back to their villages of origin in multitudes. So thousands of individuals and families have gone back to places where they had left for over 3 years. So they have gone back without food, without tools, without essential household items, without proper shelter. They have found the place without proper access to water, to clean water and sanitation facilities. In schools and hospitals, they're all broken down. So most of them don't have what to eat. So food is an urgent need right now. Essential household items, because when they fled back to their homes, they left almost everything behind that they were using as essential household items. So establishing and cleaning their wells, re-establishing their water sources like boreholes will also be essential. Providing support to the various health centers that are being left behind for a very long time, like rehabilitations, medicines, will also be very critical and will go a long way in saving the lives of these people that have gone back to their places of origin in territories around Goma, like Masisi and the Rutshuru territories. We are requesting for your prayers to pray for these people that are in dire need, that are in dire distress due to the recent crisis. We also appeal for any kind of support in addition to the prayers that each and every one of us, each and every one of you can bring to the relief of this affected population. Thank you so much.
The recent pause on U.S. foreign assistance has impacted the communities we serve in Sudan. For example, in Darfur, in the past 3 months, at least 115,000 individuals were displaced. The majority are women and children and have lost access to safe drinking water, case management, and medical services due to the closure of some of the health facilities that were funded by American government. However, this, despite the uncertainty around the world, World Relief have continued to run some of the health facilities and nutrition centers and continue to provide food assistance and run some child-friendly space in Sudan. Your giving and donation allow us to continue in life-saving assistance, and we could not continue to do this without you. Will you continue to stand with us as we continue to provide much-needed services to Sudanese individuals and the communities? Shukran Jazira, Afoy Matek.
That is a real reality check. I hadn't seen those videos before, and it's really hard to hear the impacts of programs that have been paused or reduced in many cases because of changes to U.S. policy. It's real people, real families, communities that are feeling the effects of these actions. And we just heard from 3 of the countries where World Relief directly has been affected by the pause in federal funding for foreign assistance. But even beyond that, World Relief operates in a number of other countries in Africa and elsewhere where we don't have U.S. governmental programs. Our programs are privately funded or have other funding sources. But I talked to a colleague and good friend in Malawi last week who, had similar reports of just the devastation throughout the community because of the pause on USAID funding, the impact on public health. So we're going to dive into that discussion now. And I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Bob Roberts, who's going to be moderating our live discussion with a number of leaders. So Bob is a renowned bridge builder dedicated to religious freedom, to peacemaking and civil engagement. He's got a very long, extensive resume. He's the founder of GlocalNet. He's the co-founder of the Multi-Faith Neighbors Network. He's the president for the Institute for Global Engagement. He's the chairman of Glocal Ventures Incorporated, and he's also a pastor. He's the senior global pastor of Northwood Church in Texas. His work has been recognized by leaders around the world, including the United Nations, the U.S. Department of State, for efforts to foster peace and religious freedom. He was recently a part of a group honored with the White House Uniter Award for their grassroots bridge building work across faith communities. He's a prolific author. I've personally benefited from some of his writing and a host of the Bold Love podcast. He's got a Doctor of Ministry from Fuller Theological Seminary, a Master of Divinity from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, and a BA from Baylor University. So I will turn it over to Bob.
Thank you, Matt. I'm excited to be with you, and it's good to see you. I appreciate you and your work and all of you at World Relief. You matter to us. I know things haven't been easy for you, but good news is we're not alone. So we're just going to jump right in. I have 3 fantastic guests. You know who they are. I'm just going to give you some of the highlights about who they are. I'm not going to read these long resumes because there's a lot here, but we all know who Myal Greene is, President, CEO of World Relief. He's worked with them for 14 years, worked in Rwanda for 8 years, was in charge of the church-paced programming that he did. Prior to that, he worked with the U.S. government. He holds degrees from Lehigh University and an MA from Fuller Seminary in Global Leadership. And his wife, Sharon, have 3 children. And then Lanre Williams-Ayedun, Senior Vice President of International Programs at World Relief. She's a global development leader with 17 years of experience in strategy and systems for new business acquisition, technical program design, program management, and most recently, she served as the senior program advisor to GIEPO, supporting the organization to pivot its resource base to technical assets to match changing global health demands and raise millions of dollars. For 10 years, she worked with World Vision in various roles, including the Director of Child Protection and Education. She currently sits on a working group advising the World Bank on the creation of a research agenda related to faith and development, and is a 2022 World Trade Center Institute Emerging and Developing Global Executive Fellow. This lady's got it all. Wow. And she's also been to George Washington University. And then finally, we're excited to have Jenny Eaton Dyer. She's the founder of the 2030 Collective, She directs the faith-based coalition for the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria in health policy at Vanderbilt School of Medicine. She's been the former executive director to Senator Dr. Bill Frist's humanitarian organization, Hope Through Hands in Nashville, Tennessee. Prior to that, she served as the National Faith Outreach Director for the Data Foundation with the One Campaign, Bono's organization. She lives in Franklin, Tennessee, with her husband and 2 boys. So I want to thank all of you for being here today. Thanks for making this a priority and spending some time with us. And so I'm just going to jump right in with some questions. And so, Lanre, I want to start with you. From your perspective, what are the most immediate and long-term effects that these executive actions are having on communities globally? And what needs our most urgent attention right now?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. When the executive order came that they were going to review all of foreign assistance, at first we welcomed that. We were looking forward to an opportunity for us to showcase our work and to defend the work that we were doing in partnership with the US government. We unfortunately were not given that opportunity. As we've heard, almost 80%, maybe even 90% of US government, USAID funding has been abruptly terminated. Of the remaining 10 to 20% that has kept running, we've not been able to receive payment. And so most of these projects, even though they've been allowed to continue, have had to close. And so you heard from our colleagues around the world as they are seeing the effects immediately on the programs that had previously been designed. I think the thing that's important for us to take away from this is that a lot of this happened without a chance for countries, for programs, for organizations to develop a backup. And so, we were expecting that these funds were going to be available, that these programs were going to be implemented. What you need to also remember is that many of these life-saving interventions are high-touch interventions, meaning that you have to drink clean water every time you drink water, right? So if you drink unclean water one time, that can have dire impacts on your health. You have to have access to a bed net every time that you sleep in an area that has mosquitoes. You have to take the dosage of your medicine every day. So these are not projects that we can turn on and off without significant consequences. There are things that need to be maintained in order for people to continue to be protected. So that's what you're seeing now when our staff is talking about shelves that are empty without medicine. That's because the supply chain has been interrupted. When you're hearing about clinics being closed, that's because the payment for health workers to provide that service, for them to get to the clinic, for them to be able to sit there and provide the services, that has been interrupted. That's what we're talking about. So those are the immediate effects that we're seeing. For something like malaria, for example, we are estimating, not us as World Relief, but the scientists and the people that have studied this for a long time are estimating that there could be up to 15 million new cases of malaria that would arise in a given year because of the withdrawal of these funds. And that could result in over 290,000 deaths in a year. And 290,000 deaths, the majority of those will be in children that are under the age of 5. So literally, we are saying that lives are at stake. Lives are at stake because we did not have an opportunity to plan any other way. We essentially had a promise that these things were going to happen, and that was withdrawn without an opportunity to have a discussion or a dialogue. And so I think those are some of the things that are important for us to know. And this is modeling that's looking at a year. This isn't looking out 2 years and 3 years and 5 years and 20 years. Over the course of my 20-year career, I've seen the work that these programs have done. I've seen communities be able to bank on these resources and then be able to plan for their future. Without that, and without the time that you have to be able to plan and find alternative resources to figure out how to build capacity so that these responses can go forward, we are looking at potential devastation across many different planes.
Wow. Myal, why does U.S. foreign assistance matter that much? Why should Christians care about it? And why can't we just do it on our own? Why does the church need them anyhow?
Bob, thanks for that wonderful question, and thank you for emceeing with us and asking us the questions today. One thing that really comes to mind in that question is this idea that foreign assistance at its heart is a reflection of our national values. And we, as this country, have been immeasurably blessed. And we're a people of faith within this country who routinely ask that God would bless our nation. And I really, truly believe, in the Gospels, when Jesus says, to whom much is given, much is required, that's something that we need to internalize. And we say, what does it mean for us as a nation to have been blessed in so many ways? And how do we use that blessing for the benefit of others, and what that looks like? I think contingent on that is really this recognition that most Americans underestimate how fortunate we are and how much suffering and struggle there is in the world. And so for many of us, we can't wrap our minds around what it means to go to a health center where there is no medicine on the shelves. That's just something completely foreign to the experience that we've ever had. And so what we see with foreign assistance programming is something that really has been remarkably effective in the last 4 decades, 5 decades, and consistently becoming more effective. And really at the heart of that is this understanding that a very small fraction of the federal budget, less than 1% of the federal budget, goes towards foreign assistance, but the impacts that it has on millions of lives overseas are just incredible and huge. And we're going to talk more about that today, I know. And so how do we reconcile that perspective of being greatly blessed by a nation, be able to have an impact on the lives of others? And so I think that that's something that we really as Christians need to process with and recognize. And I think we also have to recognize that the work that we do as the church or as missionaries or as Christian organizations going out in the world is really best done when it's done in partnership with other actors. And the US government for years has been a wonderful partner to Christian organizations that have gone out and done this work, whether you've received the money directly from the US government or you've just run a program alongside a USAID program that's taking place. And really, I can't think of more successful programs than things like PEPFAR, which has saved millions of lives and has been well documented. And the church was right at the heart of that and really making a stable foundation for us to do this work. And I think the last thing I would say is, foreign assistance also benefits the American people in ways that are directly, it makes us a safer and more secure nation, knowing that we're addressing many humanitarian crises around the world. And when a humanitarian crisis takes place, hostile actors come in wanting to leverage that population for a variety of reasons and trying to raise up animosity towards the United States or to other allies. And one thing that I've noticed from my personal experience, anytime that I've walked into a community, the knowledge that I was an American implementing work in the aid community immediately earned respect because people have seen for years the positive effects that the US government has had in many nations of the world. And what that does is it gives me access as a Christian implementer to go in and continue that work and to have access into a mission field or access into a place to serve and those opportunities. So I would say there's just so many benefits to this that we as the church really need to be motivated and care about.
It's one of the things we can hold our head ups about as Americans. I just got back from Syria and Bangladesh, and the needs are so profound in what they need there. Let me ask you this, Myal. Some people have the view, well, if we work with them, we have to compromise what we believe as Bible-believing Christians, and do we need to really work with the government anyhow? Have you had to compromise what you believed? Would you compromise what you believe if you were forced to?
No, I've not. And I've been in several situations where we've intentionally not gone forward with a project or not gone forward with things because we would have felt we're compromised. But at the end of the day, I actually see the opportunity to do work in partnership with the US government is oftentimes a chance to live out my values because it's an opportunity to love our neighbors on a scale beyond what we normally would be able to do. And I think a lot of times about what it says in James chapter 1, it says true religion is this, to care for the orphan and widow in their distress and keep oneself from being polluted by the world. And so I think that true expression is those two things being done in partnership with each other. And so, I think one of the reasons why we want to view it's important for Christian organizations to do this. And it's not for every Christian organization, but for those that do work with foreign assistance money from the US government, really we're doing it for strategic reasons. And first of all, oftentimes it gives us access to communities and projects and programs where there would be no other Christian organization working. And I think about the work that we did with PEPFAR, the HIV/AIDS relief program that was so transformational, impactful. If there were not Christian organizations at the table in that space, there would not have been organizations and people standing up for the importance of faithfulness and abstinence as the primary way of preventing HIV and AIDS, and such a crucial piece of that. And I think it's also the fact that when faith-based actors are at the table, we're shaping policy, design, ethical considerations, and ensuring that really there's a faith-rooted shape and perspective to that. But you ask a really important question, which is, what about compromising values? What could happen there? And first and foremost, I think it comes down to convictions of board and convictions of the leadership of the organization. And our board is deeply committed to our Christian values. We have very clearly stated beliefs that we publicize on our website, that our board holds the management team accountable to, and that's crucial. Second is we've got faith-based hiring policies in practice that ensure that we're hiring Christians to be the ones to go out and do the work and be at the forefront of this. And this really keeps us in our integrity, because we know that we're here for a higher purpose, and that's a missional purpose that we're doing this work in. Additionally, is diversification of funding is a piece of this. World Relief, we only work with USAID funding in 4 of the 13 countries that we operate in overseas, and that's a big piece of who we are and what that looks like. And so though those may be very large projects that are bringing food to people and helping save lives in health centers, it's not all that we do, and that's a big piece. And finally, and I think this comes down to what would you have done to compromise in something like this situation? And I would kind of add, the fact is that we design and we write proposals. We regularly integrate the church in there in a very meaningful way and practical way. And what that does is it allows us to say, this is how we would do the project. And USAID or the other grantor who reviews that says, yes, we'll welcome that. We'll make an agreement to do this project as you've designed and you've proposed. And sometimes people say no, and we don't know if they're saying no because they have a bias against the church or not. But we've at least been clear of the way we would do the project and how we plan to implement that. And being consistent, that is a really crucial and important piece of the process, and making sure that our values aren't compromised in the midst of that.
All right, Jeannie, we've not forgot about you. There's been several policy issues that the church and World Relief has worked on with the federal government in order to make change at the grassroots level around the world. Tell us a story of one of those, if you don't mind, and then help us understand the impact the current executive orders have had on that specific program, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me today. So I'm going to kind of pull the thread that Myal just started on PEPFAR and take you back about 25 years. I've been working on this project since all that time, since the beginning. And you may remember 25 years ago, there was a disease that was hollowing out societies across Africa and ravaging the continent. And faith leaders came together. Franklin Graham led a conference called Prescription for Hope with faith leaders and missionaries across the nation that really elevated the AIDS pandemic and brought a light to it and said, look, we've got to create a unified front on this, including the U.S. government, if we're going to defeat this disease. That was really taking out the center of society, right? Like the moms and the dads, and leaving the grandparents and the orphans. So since that time, about a year later, 2003, President Bush launched PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. And over those 23 years, the U.S. has led the world in this historic initiative to defeat the single virus of AIDS. We have, in doing so, PEPFAR has saved the lives of 26 million people. I mean, 26 million we have led. 20 million are still on ARVs today, and that's important to remember. Since that time, along with the leadership with the Global Fund, the AIDS deaths have declined 73% since 2002. So we have built the infrastructure to defeat the disease, and we really just need to stay the course to end this epidemic status by 2030. And faith-based service providers are on the front lines. They're administering ARVs, like Myal was just talking about, prevention, care for orphans and vulnerable children whose parents have died from the disease, and also offering nevirapine, the drug to prevent transmission from mother to child during pregnancy. But right now, this is all frozen, right? People aren't receiving their ARVs. Children aren't receiving care. Mothers who have HIV aren't receiving the drug to prevent their newborn infant from carrying the disease as well. And we're about to hit, if we do nothing, a massive J curve or a hockey stick, where the infection rates and the death rates could return us to this time of 2002 again. Nicholas Kristof had a great article this weekend, and he really highlighted some of these stories of the mothers and children who have died from AIDS just in the last 2 months because we have frozen these funds, not just from AIDS, but hunger and malnutrition, pneumonia, and we need to know about that, right? The church was at the helm of leading the cause for PEPFAR 25 years ago, and we can be at the helm again to let our government know that we want our taxes to continue to fund PEPFAR so we can save the lives of these 20 million people who are still on ARVs from month to month. And as Myal noted, this program is just a fraction of 1% of the US budget. We aren't tithing for the world's poor. We aren't giving 10%. Global health represents 1/4 of 1%. And that's in total. That's USAID, that's PEPFAR, that's the Global Fund, and other global health programs. So it's a very inexpensive and efficient initiative to save the lives of millions, to keep alive parents who don't want to leave their children to be orphans, to keep these economies growing, to keep security strong. We do so much for so little. And on this side of it, 25 years later, I will say, since I was on the front end of it in 2002, when less than 3% of evangelicals said they would help those with AIDS in Africa, according to a Barna poll. 25 years later, we know this program works. We're not guessing. We aren't just putting money to it and hoping that this works, right? Like, we know it works. We have saved the lives, and we're moving towards ending this epidemic status. So I think it's just important to know this story, how important and integral the church has been over 25 years, and what we can do to keep it going.
Thank you, Jenny. Lanre, let me ask you this. How does the government actually partner with organizations like World Relief? Help us understand that. Some of us don't really have a clear picture of that.
Yeah, I love this question. So what I'm going to be describing is how it used to work. So just note that we don't know what the new reality is going to be, but basically the process begins with a determination in Washington, D.C. based on congressional interest, presidential administrations. Basically, there's a conversation about, in a particular country, what is US interested in doing in that country? Is there enough US interest to even warrant having a mission, a USAID mission or a USAID office in that country? So first, there's that conversation. If we decide, yes, there's enough here that we want to be engaged in this country for a particular reason, we set up an office, and foreign service officials from the US are sent to that country, and then local staff are hired, and they staff up this USAID mission in that country. Then the staff in that country are responsible for engaging with a wide range of stakeholders. They meet with government ministries, they meet with private businesses. There's a new policy for USAID that says that they need to meet with religious communities in that engagement process to understand what are the priorities. That's where the negotiations happen, to say the US government will provide resources in these areas, but not in these areas. These the country needs to take on for themselves or find other donors or whatever. And so the US, there's this conversation that happens, this joint designing that happens. They create this document called a country development cooperation strategy. So this is a 5-year strategy that says these are the problems and the objectives that the US is trying to achieve in this country. This is where the US is going to put its money. That document then is what guides what that individual mission will release as a call for proposals. So they'll release a call for proposals. The call for proposals document says, this is the particular problem that we are trying to address, and this is the criteria by which we will decide who is going to be approved to do this project. And so organizations like World Relief and others can then write proposals. These are usually 50 to 70 page documents all included of our plan for how we will design this project, what the project will entail, how we will monitor and evaluate that the project is meeting its objectives. And this is the budget. This is how we're going to spend the money when we do this work. Over the course of my experience with USAID, when I first started in this work, it was very customary for a USAID proposal to go to just one implementer. So USAID would say, we want to work in malaria programming because we've talked with the government and that's an area that they need help in. They would issue a call for proposals. Organizations would write their proposals and USAID would choose the proposal that they felt best represented all of the criteria that they wanted to see. And it would go to one implementer and that organization would lead the work. Over the course of my career, I've seen that USAID has said, actually, it's maybe not a good idea to just have one organization doing work. We actually want a multiplicity of voices. We want lots of different perspectives because it makes our programming stronger. And so nowadays, most USAID funding goes to consortia or groups of organizations. They're actually set-asides. There's a set-aside for small businesses, for example, American small businesses that need to be included in many USAID opportunities. There's a set-aside sometimes for local organizations. And so that has been a way that organizations like World Relief have actually been able to get into helping to implement USAID projects because there's been this intentional effort to bring in new kinds of partners into partnering with the US government. But you go through the proposal process, you use your own resources to write the proposals, and then USAID goes through this criteria that includes making sure that you have clean audits, making sure that you have mechanisms for clients to be able to provide feedback and complain if they have issues with the way that you're implementing your programs. And then you get awarded the project. And what happens is you use your own funding usually to implement the work, and then the US government pays you back as you implement that project. All projects have to submit quarterly reports. Those are both financial reports as well as program reports that we have to submit. And previously, all of those reports needed to be uploaded to a public website. And so there is a clearinghouse where you can access, it's gone offline currently, but you could access up to 50 years of reports from USAID projects in every country, in every sector, because that was a requirement that we make those reports available for public consumption. So that's a little bit about the process. There's some nuance there, but essentially there's a conversation, it's co-designed, there's a rigorous application process, and then there's continuous monitoring as you implement the project.
Thanks, Lanre. Jenny, back to you. I'm curious. We understand that foreign assistance helps vulnerable communities. I get that. But here's my question. What benefit does that have for us as Americans? Now, I'd like to preach a sermon on that because I think we do a lot of things, not because it benefits us, but for those that are just so benefit driven, what difference does it make to America and to Americans?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's a question that this administration is asking, right? It's asking over and over again, how does foreign assistance make us safer, stronger, and more prosperous? And yes, yes, and yes, it does all three. When I think about global health, there's really 5 really good reasons why we invest in global health as a nation. One, it's the right thing to do, right? The moral reason to do. And we talked about that earlier. And of course, we all believe that as Christians and people of faith to uplift the poor. There's public health reasons. There's foreign policy reasons and diplomacy reasons. There are investment and economic and trade reasons we should do this. And then, of course, national security reasons. So all of these reasons, short of the charity, obviously, and altruistic reasons, benefit us back as Americans. So when we spend 1% or less than 1% of the US budget on foreign assistance, we're investing in soft power, what we call soft power. Unlike hard power, like military might, this does play an integral role in the three-legged stool of defense, diplomacy, and development. And these three go hand in hand for a better, safer nation and a better, safer world. Former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates spoke time and again during the Bush administration, during the Obama administration, about the necessary non-military strategies of soft power that were so critical for successfully implementing the hard power of military might. And I've heard over the years admirals, generals at multiple hearings talking about the critical role of soft power as a parallel track for the hard power and for the defense of the U.S. So fighting extreme poverty and addressing global health priorities, reduces conflict in nations, conflict that can turn out to be really costly for us in the long run. It also keeps us safe by fighting diseases where they are, an ocean away, keeping them at bay, not in our backyard. Fighting poverty and investing in healthy timing and spacing of pregnancies has proven to move low-income countries into middle-income countries, because if moms have less children and can go back to work, you have the bulk of that adult population being able to appropriately care for children and their parents. Thus, we have a better ways we can invest and do trade with those nations. And then also wanted to address Lanre brought up a minute ago, child survival issues, kind of going back to the moral issues too, but, the three leading deaths of children are pneumonia and diarrhea and death by mosquito bite, malaria. So if we address all those three things as well, what the church may or might not know is over the last 30 years, we've been able to cut in half the number of child deaths from about 12 million to 6 million a year. And that number, again, is going to do a J curve if we don't address those three. And those three are largely addressed out of USAID stuff. So I just wanted to bring all that to bear on why it's important for US and why it's a benefit back to us to lead the world on these critical issues.
Thanks, Jenny. And a question for every single one of you. What is the most critical steps that a church can take to promote foreign assistance? What can we do to push the government? And then let's say they don't do it. Then what do we do? What does the church do? How would each of you respond to that question? Myal, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, I think it's important to talk amongst the people of the church, whether that's speaking from the pulpit if you're a church leader about the importance of this and what that means, or as if it means talking in your churches to fellow brothers and sisters in Christ who share a heart for the poor and a heart for the poor around the world. And I think that there's many people in churches who have a deep compassion and love for people living in vulnerability around the world. And what does that mean to educate people on this intersection between foreign aid? Because I think there's a lot of myths and mistruth being spread right now about foreign assistance. So I think it's just take some of this information you've learned today and in other forums and really bring that information to people. I also think we shouldn't be afraid to, as the church, as people of Christ, to encourage the government to continue to fund these programs and to continue this and to lean into advocacy around this. And I was thinking in my devotion about Ezra and King Cyrus recently, and the fact that Ezra was funded by King Cyrus, a Persian, to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, and Nehemiah was funded by another Persian king to rebuild the wall, and so I think that this is and they went and they asked. And that was where it came down to. And I think we can see needs around the world and ask the government to fund those. And really, if our values and our motivations are really coming from a point of faith, I think that that's a very meaningful thing for a church to do and something we can be motivated in our space to do.
Good. Jenny.
So I loved what Dan Hasseltine said, and Dan is a longtime friend. I've worked with him for 25 years on these issues, and he was saying, listen, if the government isn't going to support USAID we have to rise to the occasion. We have to pull out our pocketbooks, and we need to be donating funding to organizations that are going to fill in the gap, step in the gap. So that is one thing I think the church needs to rise up to do. The second thing is advocate, advocate, advocate. I used to work for the former Senate Majority Leader, Bill Frist. I worked with him for 10 years. And a story he used to tell was that as Majority Leader, if 300 calls came in on a single issue, it was red flagged for him. But think about that for a minute. I know 300 calls sounds like a lot, but if we have 340 million Americans, think how small that is. Like just 300 people. I mean, we have more people on this call than 300 people. And so I think we need to take a minute and consider calling our representatives, calling our members of Congress, calling the Majority Leader Thune, and letting him know that we care deeply about foreign assistance. We care about the lives of the world's poorest. We care about their health, and we would like to see these programs reinstated or supported so that we are contributing to saving lives. These calls matter. Every call matters, even just a few.
It's good, Jenny. Lanre.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that Jenny and Myal have said. I would double, triple click on all of that. I think I will just add also pray. There are some really big holes that have been left, and people that are scrambling. And that includes governments and government officials in these countries that are looking at the promises that they were planning on vanish. And so praying for wisdom for leaders around the world, praying for covering and for unlikely sources to arise from different places, praying for comfort for those who are suffering. As people of faith, we believe that prayer is one of the most important things that we can do. And I think praying that we would know what to do. I think in the last couple of weeks, we've all been a little shell-shocked and a bit stunned at what's happening. And it can feel overwhelming, and it can, even just being shocked can paralyze us from doing the things that Jenny and Myal have said that are important for us to do. So I would just make a pitch there that we should be people that are grounded and rooted in prayer.
Thank you, Lanre. Matt Soerens, get back on this thing. Turn your camera on. We've got time for one question, and here it is. I want to ask you from the audiences, and that's this. How is World Relief working with Congress to try and protect foreign assistance?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So we're doing so in a number of ways. First of all, we work on a lot of coalitions. So with a lot of like-minded Christian organizations, some of whom also have some direct impacts from foreign assistance, others of whom don't, but see the impacts around their community because the organizations that had been receiving governmental funds are so profoundly impacted. So we do a lot of coordinated congressional meetings. My colleague Chelsea is our government relations director and is on the Hill on a very regular basis. But I know that she would want to underscore what Jenny said, which is that those meetings are really important, but they really have credibility only to the extent that members of Congress are getting phone calls and emails and messages from their constituents, from the people who live in their state as a senator or in their congressional district. So we've got tools at the World Relief website to help facilitate reaching out to your members of Congress. We really encourage you all to do that. And I would say for members of Congress, we're getting, different responses, but a lot of them are coming to us for updates on what's happening because there's a lot of lack of clarity, even on the Hill. They're trying to get more information from USAID or from the State Department. This has historically been a bipartisan issue. And again, going back to the time when Majority Leader Frist helped lead the charge on PEPFAR, obviously as a Republican, and a number of other issues. There's a lot of support on both sides of the aisle for foreign assistance. Secretary Rubio historically has been a strong advocate for the importance of foreign assistance, and we really want to make sure that they're continuing to hear that message now and that they can convey that message to the administration as well.
Thanks, Matthew. So I was reading the scriptures this morning, and I want to challenge you to go read Matthew 25. It's a fascinating passage. We always talk about the least of these. I was hungry, I was thirsty, I was naked, I was sick, I was in prison. Okay, we'll all talk about that. But it's fascinating if you go to context. Number one, It's about the judgment standing before God. But here's what's fascinating. It's the nations that are standing in judgment before God. That's fascinating. Let that sink in. So in other words, a nation has a responsibility, if it's going to be a healthy nation, to the hungry, the thirsty, the sick, the naked, those in prison, all of that. And the second thing that's fascinating is, though the nation has a responsibility, individuals are held accountable. Mm-hmm. That means I have a responsibility, what my nation does as a citizen, by how I speak up and what I'm doing for others. So here are three things every single person can do. And I want to challenge you to do. My wife and I do it. We're deeply involved in this work. We're going to stay involved. God hasn't changed his plan. He hasn't changed his mind. So whatever the government does, the government does. But we have to do what's right as Christians. And so that means, first of all, we need to give. Our church gives to World Relief. My wife and I give to World Relief. We are big believers in World Relief. So I want to challenge you to keep giving. Here's the second thing I want to, and you can go to that link and you can give. And I want to challenge, there's not a better group in the whole U.S. that does this than World Relief. I believe in them. I'm always trying to connect them with different groups that I work with all over the world. So give. I mean, you need to sit down and look at your budget and say, God, what are we going to give consistently? You know, we go, well, it's just too much. What difference does mine make? God doesn't hold us accountable for how much we give, but do we give? And do we give what he wants us to give? Here's the second thing that we can do. We can advocate. We can speak up. That's why I'm on this webinar, because I want my voice to be heard. And the reality is, you can sign the statement. There's a great statement that's been written. I've signed it. I encourage you to sign it. Wouldn't it be great if we had 1 million signatures on that? And so sign it, and then call your congressman. No, they're probably not going to take your call, but they'll record what you were calling about and your concern that you have. So you have to advocate. You have to speak up. You have to speak out. And then the third thing you have to do, you have to pray. You have to pray, and you have to ask God, what are you saying to us? What do you want to do? And let me just say this. I think it's important to understand this. We go through tough times, and we think, oh, where is God and what's going on? We don't know what's happening. Let me just assure you, God is in control. I believe that with all of my heart. If you read the last part of Deuteronomy and you're reading Moses as he's praying this whole book-long prayer about entering into the promised land, reminding them the story and everything, two things are present. Number one, God wants to bless the socks off Israel. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And number two, they're going to go through living hell, part of that journey. It's fascinating. We think that either God blesses us or times are hard. No. He blesses us in the midst of tough times. So here's what I would say to you. God, what are you saying to us? And what are you going to do? What new doors are you going to open? The story of World Relief, and not just World Relief, but all of us that care about refugees, can't be the government quit helping us, so we're depressed and we're quitting. No, it has to be, all right, God still called us. We're going to move forward. The story of history of people who make a difference is not those who look at the challenges and they run away, but they stand strong in the midst of those challenges. They don't give up and they don't stop. So I want to encourage you, suck it up, stand up, move forward. It's not how fast you move, but it's that you move. And if enough of us do it, we change things. It was evangelicals after World War II that were the leaders in dealing with refugees. God, don't let us be the ones who would be responsible for stopping helping people do what God holds every nation accountable for in Matthew 25, especially a nation that says we believe in God, that has a huge majority of evangelicals. May we take the word of God literal and help the poor and the hurting. Let me lead us in prayer. Father, we come before you and our hearts are heavy. Mine are heavy, God. I've been all over the world in multiple countries, Lord, where I've seen starving and sick people in Sudan and in Pakistan and in Bangladesh and in Syria. And God, I look at this world that's broken, and you've told us to be salt and light. You've called us to engage it and make a difference. And Jesus, just like I was a 10-year-old little boy who felt your call to be a missionary, God, that call has never left me. And Jesus, here's my prayer, that there would be a group of Jesus-loving, Bible-believing, Spirit-filled Christians that with all their might will stand up and say, we're going to do what God has called us to do, regardless of what everybody else does. Lord, the test of following you is not that people applaud us, not that people agree with us when we do right, but that they may even judge us and curse us for what we do, knowing what your word teaches us. Give us the guts and the courage to not just say we believe in you, but to practice what you've called us to do. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. Let's go help some people. Thank you very much for being here today.